Okay, well, I'll just dive right in. So my name's Graham. I live near Rochester, Minnesota. I'm a social work student at Winona State right now. So I'll start my junior year in the fall. Like I kind of mentioned earlier, I do intuitive readings where I connect with people's spirit guides and share the information I get from them. So I've done some other of these little half-hour talks like this. And a lot of them I've talked about spirit guides and kind of what they are, how we can connect with them, like what are the benefits of connecting with our guides. And so today I'm talking a little different topic, courage and vulnerability. I feel like that's something that spirit guides can kind of be a little ethereal, and like not all of us are really familiar with them, like what exactly is that? But like courage and vulnerability, and that's things we can all relate to a little more easily. And so it's something that for me, I've gotten to develop a little more courage and a little more willingness to be vulnerable throughout the past few years. I kind of want to share that journey with you guys and then highlight different areas of our lives where we can be vulnerable. And when I talk about vulnerability, I mean like the kind of feeling that we get when we step outside of our comfort zone or do something new, and it like feels like kind of like you're off solid ground and you're like floating a little directionless, or like jumping into the unknown like that, which can be a lot of things. It can range from being like really scary or producing a lot of anxiety to like also being really exciting and fun, or kind of like a mix of all that. So that's vulnerability. And as I'm talking with you guys today, if there's different things you want to share or chime in on, feel free to. I invite you to. And then also at the end, we'll have some time to just open it up to everyone and have kind of an open discussion. And so as I kind of share some of my story with you, I hope you're able to draw inspiration from it and glean some insights, get some takeaways. And so I'll kind of start like growing up. I would say I wasn't extra courageous or really willing to be vulnerable. It wasn't something that I knew anything about or was aware was a positive way to be. And so kind of even starting in elementary school, I was popular in elementary school, and although like more quiet, like I had a good amount of self-esteem then, but a lot of my self-esteem was really built on what other people thought of me. So then come to middle and high school, when it's like, oh, I realize I'm actually not as like cool as I once thought. It's like, ooh, my self-esteem really tanked, and like then I'm on the other extreme of like, oh, like I'm a loser, and like all that kind of, I guess like being really hard on myself and a lot of self-judgment and whatnot. And so yeah, then my social anxiety kind of started to ramp up more, and I wasn't as comfortable being myself around my peers like I once was. Eventually going through school, I received a bipolar diagnosis at one point, and then looking back, I realized part of why I was having such a tough time in middle and high school is that I was really trying to push my social anxiety and my fear away, and trying to like go through by like shoving away these parts of me that were feeling that way. And I've come to learn a little more now in hindsight that we're just like moving into those parts of us and being with those parts of us, all of us, every part of us, and moving through them is a lot more effective than trying to push it away. And so at that time too, I didn't really like seriously question my fear or like ask why I was like afraid. So for instance, being like afraid of talking to other people, I never really like looked into it and was like, well, what am I afraid of? Because I look back now and I see, oh, I was really, and I still am to some extent too, like afraid of being judged, afraid of being judged by other people, or like seen as seen as maybe like weird or seen as different or all those things really. And in that sense, even a deeper part I think is just judging myself kind of, and like feeling like I'm not good enough or things like that. And I really, in middle and high school there too, I really didn't want anyone to see how anxious I was. Like I could go all day without talking to anybody because I was very avoidant of everything. And like when anxious situations would come up, which was like all the time, because like I was scared of almost everything, just always felt like I was like on high danger and high alert, and I didn't want people to like see how anxious I was. I was so scared of like people like finding out, and there's like no way of hiding it really either. Like you can to an extent, but like it's clear you're like, okay, like that guy over there, he's not comfortable. But I just hadn't really come to terms with that's where I was at that time. And so things kind of started to turn around bit by bit. We all figure things out in our own way. But a big turning point was when I met Ken Lewicki. And so Ken, he's a channeler. He helps people connect with their spirit guides. I'd met some other intuitives and different psychic people before I met him. And so from my experiences with those other people, I was like, whoa, these people can like share deep and intimate details about my life that I have no idea how they're doing it or how it's happening. And I was like, wow, this is really cool. And so I started working with Ken, and he started helping me connect with my own guides and connect with other people's spirit guides. And I was taking one of his workshops, and in it, there's a group of us, and we were practicing giving each other readings, so connecting with other people's guides and giving other people's readings. And I think we were all a little uncomfortable doing that, or it was new territory for most of us, so it was kind of it brought up vulnerability. And so at the end of that, Ken gave us homework, like go out, at the end of that workshop, he said, like, go out and do 20 practice readings. Just do 20 free practice readings, doesn't matter who it's with, it can be 5-10 minutes, but go out and do it. And I was so used to, at this point, still like avoiding everything, or if things were like scared me, avoiding them, or like projects come up, always doing them last minute, really avoiding scary things, So this was one of the first times where I'm like, he gave us the idea to do 20 readings, and I felt scared to do it, but I actually went and did it, and little bit by bit started doing them, which was different, but also it felt so empowering, because for one of the first times in my life, I was like proactively taking action and not waiting until like I absolutely had to act, or I was in like way backed into the corner. I was like doing something that was good for me and expansive, but of my own free will, not because I had to, but because I was deciding to do it. But it really brought up my fear of judgment and being judged by other people, because I'm like, oh my God, like what if I give people poor information or just straight inaccurate information? Like I don't want to mislead people, or what if people get angry at me while I'm doing readings, right? All these kind of concerns that are like valid to an extent, but I don't think should really keep us from things to be mindful of, but not things to like stop us from moving forward too. So I started doing the readings, and like I remember I'd often sit at like my desk, my desk, because I did a lot of them over Zoom, and I'd show up like a few minutes late because I was like just preoccupying myself with other stuff. So I'd like sit down late, and I'd be like, oh, they're actually in the Zoom room. I was still like holding out that maybe they wouldn't show up. But no, here they are. And then I'd like sit there and like be like, oh my God. And then kind of sit there and work up the courage to let them in. And then typically as I like would let them in, then I'd feel better. And I was noticing after each reading, it was becoming like a little easier to do the next one and then the one after it. And one of the principles that Ken really shared with all of us was that, which applies to readings, but also I think life in general, is when it comes to like situations out of our comfort zone or things we're afraid of, we don't get the confidence first and then take the action. We take the action and the confidence comes afterwards. So for readings, like I wouldn't feel confident before doing readings. I'm not going to get the confidence beforehand, but then after doing some and after taking the action, then like the comfortability or the confidence starts to come. And I feel like, I don't know if there's really a way around that. Like it's not necessarily the easiest way, but that's really helped me be like, okay, like as I do things, I will start to feel more confident. And after I did those first 20, I felt good, and I'm like, yay, I did it. And I had another session with Kenny. He's like, why don't you do another 20? I'm like, oh. So like, okay, this sounds good. So I went and did another 20, and then again, I started to feel more confident with it, and I was seeing that being willing to like be vulnerable doing readings was helping me in all the other aspects of my life. Like it was just becoming easier to talk with strangers, becoming easier to like do a talk like this, or do simple things like call up the mechanic and not feel like so scared to do something, like these simple interactions that we do with people. And so yeah, it was really stepping into vulnerability, and in one area of our lives really opens it up in all areas too. They're all interconnected. So I ended up making a Facebook page for doing readings too, and that was the next step of like, going like really public doing it and not just doing free ones. So that was the next step of vulnerability. And I think, yeah, anything that's new or unknown, we're gonna feel that way to some extent or another. And that's a good thing, as it means we're growing and we're expanding and we're kind of moving forward in a sense. And so yeah, I was starting to, I think, learning to, lean into these situations a little more instead of always running away. Because while running away can kind of, to some effect, be helpful in the short term, like you avoid it in the short term. In the medium long term, you're running away all the time, right? And it doesn't feel good to always be kind of running away from our lives. So I kind of talked about doing like readings and stuff in my journey with that to a degree. Now I want to talk about like some other areas of our life where we can be, where vulnerability comes up. And one of those is being vulnerable with authority figures. So authority figures that could be like supervisors, bosses. I guess I'm a student right now, so like professors or teachers, parents, institutions, companies. We have a lot of kind of authority figures in our lives. And I think most of us can relate to like a fear of kind of confrontation with authority figures, and like these people in our lives that we feel like kind of have some kind of control over us or are like above us, and like we don't want to upset them, right? And I think what's been really helpful for me is to ask myself, like what's the worst that could happen if I say, for instance, like asking my boss for a raise. Like what's the worst that could happen? Realistically, the worst thing that could happen would be he would say no. Okay, and is that really that big of a deal? Not really. And then what's the best thing that could happen? I mean, the best thing that could happen in that case, like asking my boss for a raise, would be he gives me a raise. And that's pretty awesome. So like, the worst thing that could happen is he just says no, and the best thing, I would get a raise, and it feels appropriate for me to ask, so, but still the feelings will be there of like, no, I can't do that, like, for whatever reason it may be. So kind of, I find asking like what's the worst and best thing that could happen kind of puts it in a more objective sense and helps us not be so caught in if we're having a lot of fear around the situation. So like, yeah, I had an example just like that where I asked my boss for a raise, and I'm like, would you match the $15.50 I had at this other job? And it was so funny because he just goes, yeah, no problem. Like, it was nothing. It really, I'm like, I feel like I could have asked for like $20 an hour, and he would have been like, sure. But then I had another instance where I'm in an internship right now and it's unpaid. And I've been doing it for a while, and I'm like, okay, I'm essentially doing the same work as all the other, in this specific instance, I'm doing the same work as all the other paid employees. So I'm like, well, why don't I ask and see if they'd make me paid? And so I asked my boss, and she said no. And it's like, well, okay, like that was the worst that could happen, and it's not really a big deal. But it's not always like, in these cases, like it's not always the outcome that's the only important thing. So for instance, whether you get the raise or not, but the fact just that we ask and we're willing to like put ourselves out there and go out on a limb, because it makes it so much easier to ask the next time, or when something else that comes up that's kind of scary, it's easier to kind of show up in those cases too. Yeah, and so another example I want to go into is kind of like with family members, because I think that's, I know for me, like right now I'm currently living at home too while I'm going to school, like with parents, like getting upset with my parents, or it could be siblings or just family in general. I'll give the example of like the TV is on all the time at our house, and I think that's a fairly normal thing in a lot of households, but it's something that like, I don't know, I like silence a lot, or it bugs me in a way that it doesn't irritate my dad or my mom or my brothers. Like they're all fine with it, but me, it bothers me. And I really like I've tried to fight this for a long time and be like, well, it shouldn't be a big deal, or like it shouldn't bother me, or if like I was more advanced or something, it wouldn't bother me. But I finally like asked kind of my parents about it. I don't know why I was so scared, but I was really scared to like ask them like, hey, would it be okay if maybe we like had the TV off sometimes, or like just like hung out together as a family more? And I found that they've actually been like really receptive to that. And again, even if they weren't, it would just be the fact that like we ask and that we're honest and like going out there and like authentically being like, this is what's going on for me, like this is bugging me, and I'm not attacking you. It's not like it's your fault, but this is bothering me nonetheless. And I find that like whatever relationship it is, whether it's romantic or with your family, like it's brought me closer together with my family and with other people in my life that I've been more willing to be vulnerable with and more honest with. And kind of the last specific area I want to talk about with vulnerability is being vulnerable in our more romantic relationships. I found that being vulnerable and also really transparent in my romantic relationships has been extremely beneficial. And I found that it builds a lot of intimacy too, when you're just really being real. Like in high school, so my first girlfriends in high school and after high school, I was definitely not transparent with. And it was more because I just, again, with my like anxiety and like bipolar diagnosis, like I hadn't fully come to terms with my own emotions and the fact that I was struggling in these ways. So I really didn't share much, like the full extent of that with the girls I was dating at that time in high school and after high school. And I had one girl that we kind of got into a relationship haphazardly and really quickly. And I realized early into it, like, this isn't really working for me. Like, I'm not really feeling it. But I wasn't able to come to terms with that. Like I wanted it, I really wanted it to work or like be good enough. So I kind of tried to run away from the fact that I wasn't that into her, and the relationship didn't go well, clearly. And I was very kind of codependent in that sense, like, no, but I really need her and stuff. And like, I'd bike over to her house every night and spend the night at her house which was a lot of work, but like like even something like that, like I wasn't willing to like share like, hey, I don't really want to do this anymore. But it really taught me a lot of like, okay, this is like not healthy. And this is like what does not work very well. And when she finally did break up with me a few months later, I felt devastated because I was really attached to her, but it was really good for both of us in the medium long term. And kind of with my relationships now, as I've seen how valuable just being really honest is and transparent and vulnerable is. I was recently in a relationship with a girl older than me, and she had a couple kids too, and we connected well, and I really liked her, but I was just honest with her, like, I'm not interested in like stepping into a parental role right now. That's not something I'm interested in. And we like talked about it, and it was really good and healthy. And then we both realized, okay, like she at this time is looking for someone that is like ready to kind of step into that role, and that's not something I am looking for right now. But we were able to resolve that in a much more like healthy way, as opposed to like not talking about it and I don't know, getting into another weird like just mess. And like with my relationship right now too, I've just been able to share with my partner just like the fact too that just pretty much it's hard for me to say up here. But just the fact that like I don't know how committed I am right now to our relationship together, and that I'm like kind of trying to figure that out. But instead of like just doing that on my own without talking to her about it, like I've included her in on that conversation. And then I also find that like she to some degree can relate to that too, and isn't exactly sure either, but it feels a lot better to like be figuring that out together, as opposed to like trying to do that all alone, and then they're doing that all alone too. And again, like I said, I've just found that like just being really transparent and willing to be vulnerable in these intimate relationships really builds intimacy, and it's really nice when like our partners can accept us for who we really are, and we can accept our partner for who they really are, and we're both able to kind of be our own individuals in our relationships and be our own person, and not have to feel like we got to twist and turn so much, but yet we can still really grow together a lot too. So yeah, that was kind of what I wanted to share there on relationships. And it kind of, as we're closing here, I really think that like vulnerability is strength. It really is. It's something that like shows that we're growing, that we're like willing. It's a soft, gentle strength, but a strength nonetheless. And like I said, like as I've seen in my life, myself willing to be more vulnerable, like doing readings with my bosses, with family, in my romantic relationships, it's really just helped me all across the board. And it's helped, again, making it easier to talk to strangers, give talks like this, or just do the everyday things and just feel more comfortable and confident in myself as I am. Yeah, and again, I've learned too that we don't get the confidence and then take the action, that we take the action and then the confidence comes later. And so I think I encourage you guys to kind of see where you can step into a little more vulnerability in your life and be a little more transparent with the people in your life. And also to take the action in your life that you want to take. So whatever your interests may be, like maybe you're interested in doing readings too, or maybe it's starting your own business of some kind. Like I encourage you to feel into that. If it feels like a really vulnerable thing to do, maybe just take some baby steps towards it and see where it takes you. So yeah, and if you want to, you can check out my website. It's heartcenteredchanneling.com. I do online readings over Zoom on there. Also, my Facebook and YouTube channel, they're just Heart Centered Channeling, and I will be putting this talk up on there. So if there's anything you wanted to look at it again, or there's any things that hit home for you, you can do that. Any questions or comments or feedback of any kind? Yes?
Do you ever come across people that aren't as vulnerable as they should be to receive a reading, maybe more cynical, maybe?
Oh yeah, a little more closed off. Well, I think because that's a spectrum, right? Of like, like a little closed off to being more open. And I found that the people that are more open, it is easier to get information for them. And then people that are closed off, there's an aspect too where I've noticed where if I like don't have permission from someone to give them a reading, or even if it's unconsciously, like they don't want one, I don't get very good information for them because their guides like respect that. The fact that they don't, they might say they want one, but like inside they're like, no, like don't read me, don't reveal anything. So that, those ones I won't get as much information. I'll be like, wait, do I have permission? Like, oh, I don't. And so then, but that makes a difference for sure. Anything else? Yeah.
Just kind of curious in terms of taking the action first and then letting the confidence develop. What advice do you tend to give people, or kind of talking about? I mean, most of the time, the reason we're afraid of vulnerability is maybe we have taken action and it hasn't been reinforced, or like, because not everything is meant to. Sometimes we take action on something that isn't actually right for us.
Yeah.
So that, and then also kind of differentiating how many times to keep taking that action and trying to let that confidence develop before you kind of decide this isn't the right action for me, or do I keep trying to take bigger actions or smaller actions to keep working towards it?
What a great question. I think that's really good. I think it probably depends on, I'd say like whether whether to kind of call it good and be like, okay, like whatever, this isn't for me, I've been trying and it hasn't been working, or whether to continue going with it. Would kind of depend on whether you still feel called in that direction or not. Because I mean, my first, even I'd say 150 to 200 readings I did weren't like, they were still kind of rocky at that point and like choppy, or like I would still get readings where like, God, I like didn't get really anything helpful for them even after doing like 150, 200. But I still felt inside like I wanted to keep going and keep doing it. So I'm like, okay, I'm gonna keep on going with it. But if it's something different, or like you've tried a few times and I don't know if there's this, and you're no longer feeling like, okay, like I've tried this and I don't really feel called in this direction anymore. But that's probably kind of a hard line to find of like when do you call it good, or when
am I just scared, and when am I
feeling
called anymore?
Right. Very good question. Anything else? Well, sounds good, guys. You're free to leave, or if you like to stay and chat with me a little bit, I'll just be hanging out here. So thank you so much for being here.